Hi everyone, this is Dan, and this is Green Lantern Green Arrow Volume 1 by Dennis O'Neil and Neal Adams. Yeah! So I think I'm going to get a little bit of heat for this one. I'm just reviewing the first issue. I did read the first three issues of this volume. And I'm gonna be honest. This was recommended to me. A lot of people say this is a really good run, and I'm not sure I like it. And I guess I'll kind of explain why here real quick. But anyway, let's just jump into it real fast. This is actually important. I'll talk about this later. So we get into it. It starts with Green Lantern number 76, which is April of 1970. You get this kind of little interesting opener to get the kid to pay 15 cents. Damn, 15 cents. Wow, that's really cheap. Anyhow, you get a really cool splash page. This is more of like a Marvel style splash page. I guess Marvel at this time was kind of giving DC a run for their money. And Green Lantern's flying around. I believe this is Star City because they don't use real life cities. And Green Lantern runs into some hoodlums accosting this old man right here, and they push him down. And he proceeds to put some law and order on these guys till he finds out that he's not necessarily the good guy in this particular instance. Or at least that's the way Dennis O'Neil wants to write this story. So he gets some stuff thrown at him by the other people, the other citizens around it, and Green Arrow kind of explains that, you better check your privilege, brah. No, I'm joking. Though, honestly, there's a lot of language and style in the way that Dennis O'Neil writes this that is interesting because it kind of is a precursor in many ways to modern-day Marvel as far as driving a lot of politics. So, anyhow, Green Arrow starts lecturing and kind of talking a little bit of smack to Green Lantern. And then we get in here, and it's kind of like he's explaining the situation of the people living in this place. And it's not necessarily... I guess my complaint here is that I'm not unsympathetic to what this is saying, but the way this is written out, it kind of comes across as being a bit, I guess... It's too much of Dennis O'Neil's voice coming across as like almost lecturing him, right? Especially like this part right here. I've been reading about you, how you work for the Blue Skins, and how on a planet someplace you helped a lot out the Orange Skins. You done considerable for the Purple Skins. Only there's skins you never bothered with the Black Skins. I want to know how come. Answer me that, Mr. Green Lantern. And Dennis kind of makes some doubt. Oh, I can't and everything. And I'm gonna be like dead honest with you, right? Like, there's just, I guess the right way to describe it is that it's not that I'm against these kind of stories. And again, to be fair to Dennis O'Neil, I didn't grow up in the 60s or the 70s. I'm obviously, a child of a much younger generation. So I didn't grow up with these comics. So maybe there was truly some really, really bad stuff going on this time that I don't understand reading it now. But it actually comes across as just too forced and too blunt in his writing, which is unfortunate because the actual, I guess, dramatic structure is solid. I think the plotting is solid. And more importantly, the artwork by Neal Adams is fantastic. I can't believe this is a 1970s comic. It looks amazing. It's really, really nice art by him. I really enjoyed it a lot. But yeah, so you go into it, and Green Lantern begins basically questioning himself, and he goes over to kind of talk to the guy that he saved earlier and ask him, what's going on, etc. Mainly this guy's going to kick out everybody in that building right there for a profit, all that kind of stuff. And Green Lantern kind of argues with him to not do that, etc. And then suddenly he breaks into violence. I don't know why. Yeah, that's another thing. Like, so something I've noticed throughout a lot of these issues with Dennis O'Neil writing is, for whatever reason, just the weirdest things will push the heroes into violence or trigger them into violence in ways that aren't really heroic, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but the way he does it is just not very nuanced, and it kind of comes across as blunt. Again, I said in a previous issue that I'm not a fan of like heavily political comics, just because it's not that they're inherently bad. It's just they're very difficult to do well, and you need a lot of nuance when you're doing it. Unless your goal is just to write, a sort of polemic kind of like, hey, these are my opinions and these are why my opinions are cool. Here's a story jamming my opinions down your throat. Then I guess, yeah, you could do that, but it's not going to be good storytelling, at least in my view. So again, the Council of Oa starts bitching at Green Lantern, and he kind of bitches back at them. And he gets put on some other mission, and he just doesn't want to do it. He wants to go back to Earth and help Earth out. Meanwhile, Green Lantern kind of confronts that guy as well. And here's where I think things get kind of, I guess, bad for me, is that I'm just going to skip ahead a couple pages. There's a lot of things about this villain that aren't explained until the end as far as why he is a villain. And it's kind of frustrating to me reading it, because I'm like, you probably would have gotten people to buy what your heroes, Green Lantern and Green Arrow, are doing if you would have explained that he had corrupt deals and other things that he was doing, which the attorney that he brings, Jeremy Tynan, explains ahead of time earlier in the story. Not necessarily, like, you could still have that moment where Green Lantern defends him unknowingly about what he does. But if you would have explained it earlier what his problem was, and his violence and his corruption and his crimes, it would have made more sense. And because he brings it in so late into the story, it just kind of feels like Dennis O'Neil and Julius Schwartz, the editor. That's another thing, is the editing in these comics. I'm not a fan of. There's a lot of points where there's really confusing panels. And there's a lot of times where, like, this really needed to be edited a little bit better. And, yeah, man, just, I don't know. So you get an epilogue, and the one counselor of Oa decides to go with them, and they have a talk about going, and they decide to go on a road trip in a truck across the city. And at this point, I'm just kind of like, okay, someone's been reading a little too much Jack Kerouac at this point. Anyhow, here's what I will say about this trade paperback, right, that I think is really interesting. So first off, they chose a really interesting decision to reprint this particular trade paperback in newsprint, and it's really, really nice. They did it in like a higher quality type of newsprint, so the colors stick really well. And it feels and looks super, super nice. I love the way that they did this trade paperback. The other thing that I will say is that the art by Neal Adams is fantastic. I'm not a DC guy, so I don't really have a ton of experience with Neal Adams. But yeah, dude, I really dig the art. The art is really, really good. But the story, especially the first half so far, I did notice that some of the stories, when I was skimming through, they get a little more interesting in at least the first 3 pages. Sometimes I like to do this with even trade paperbacks. I'll like skip to the next issue, because you can do that with comic books, and just read the first 3 pages to see what it does. And I did notice the ones in the back are actually a little more interesting than I think the first 3 or 4. But I'm gonna be dead honest. I'm not a fan of Dennis O'Neil's writing and plotting in this trade paperback, and I kind of feel weird saying that, because I know there's a lot of DC fans that really, really, really like his stuff, especially this team: Dennis O'Neil, Neal Adams, and Julius Schwartz as editor. A lot of people, praise the world out of it, and Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there's a because I know they did Batman later on, so maybe I read the Batman and that's like a different style story. But I didn't really get this. And another interesting thing is like, so he has like an introduction, and it's really long and kind of like, ooh, this is like a thick introduction. Like this is really really thick. Honestly, I'm not really like. There's introductions in my omnibus by Chris Claremont that are a lot more succinct than this. And what's really interesting, like, is he admits that Green Arrow, Green Lantern, Green Arrow was canceled after 13 issues. And even though he's really proud of what they did, this thing was canceled for poor sales. Kind of like SJW Marvel. Sorry, guys, I know I probably should bring that up, but yeah, and I kind of see why, and that is, I think it took him too late, at least in my feeling, to kind of realize that people are more interested in these characters than Dennis O'Neil's view on the world. And I think that's kind of an important lesson to learn, right? At least for, comics and writing in general, right? I feel like all the hard work that Neal Adams put into this art was kind of wasted by Dennis's sort of ham-fisted, writing of social issues of the time. Is this comic very influential? Yeah, I would believe so. This is the 1970s, and this is, at least in my understanding, one of the first comics that really kind of started addressing, politics and social issues of the time, right? And, and in that regard, historically, this comic probably has like a lot of value. I guess just for me as someone reading for like stories about the Green Lantern and understanding the Green Lantern, I'm not too fond of this trade paperback and the stories in it. I think I am going to fully finish it, all the way, and maybe pick up the second volume to see if I missed something. But yeah, just being honest, I personally didn't enjoy it that much, but I could see why certain people would enjoy it, and I certainly will never say anything bad about the art. The art's fantastic. But yeah, whew. Anyhow, yeah, so if you like this video, hit the thumbs up. If not, or if you disagree with my view on this, leave a comment down below. And if you like the channel, please subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. Yeah, and I will probably move on to, I'm going to probably do maybe a few more random Green Lantern issues before I do, what was it, Emerald Twilight. Another very controversial Green Lantern storyline, I should say. And then that should be it, other than maybe some Kyle Rayner and some John Stewart Green Lantern before I redo Green Lantern Rebirth. But anyhow, I will see you next time.